Everyone, welcome back to Pocket Perspective Podcast, where we break down complex money topics and make them easier to understand. I'm Tinisha, your host, and just a bit of a disclaimer, my voice isn't doing the best today, so please bear with me if you are listening to this. Today I wanted to touch on the water industry in the UK. So I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about kind of why can't we choose our water supplier like we do with our gas and electric, and when we pay our water bill, what are we actually paying for? And unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to answer those questions because I've probably got the questions myself. So I'm really excited to have a special guest on, Andy Wright, who is the Senior Leader at Consumer Council for Water. So hi, Andy.
Hi.
Thank you very much for joining today. And so I wondered if you were able to kind of tell us a bit about yourself, your role at CCW, and also the kind of the mission and what the actual organisation does.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I lead our work on social policy. So that's a lot of the things that are basically about supporting customers, protecting them, whether it's from charging issues or in terms of their financial situation or wider vulnerability needs. It's all that sort of area about making sure that the water companies are doing the right thing for customers. And that fits into the wider work of CCW, which is about being the body which represents water customer needs. We speak out for them. We do lots of research to understand what customers want, and we reflect that back in our work with government, with water companies and other stakeholders. And at a more practical level, we also help water customers who are going through problems with their water companies to resolve those, so we can take up their complaints for them and get a resolution for them where they're struggling to do that.
That's really interesting. I think the average person, like consumers, just won't even know that you guys exist, probably, because all they deal with normally is the supplier, right?
Yeah, and I think, hopefully most people don't need to know about us because things work for them. But,
Mm.
it's really important for those people who are facing problems that we know we're there. So our details are on all the bills that you receive and the leaflets that come from your company. But obviously, it's only in times of things going wrong that we often tend
Yeah.
to read those things.
Oh, amazing. Well, I'll keep the links down below in the description if anyone does want to reach out as well. So I'll make sure that everyone's got access to those. So just starting off with the questions. So the first one I have is, and why can't we pick our water supply, like we do our gas and electric? And if you're not happy with someone, you can say, I'm going to leave and go into the next person. Like, why doesn't that happen with water?
It's a great question and one we do get all the time. And,
Yeah.
what it goes back to is that obviously the water industry was privatized in 1989. So used to be provided by, public bodies who provided those services on a regional basis. Then it became into private company hands. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to have four sets of pipes and four sets of sewers and treatment works. And so in some ways, things like water are a natural monopoly. And that's also the same for energy because we have competition in energy, but it's actually about who sends your bills out and does those sorts of things rather than who's actually supplying the services. Those are done by a single body, and it's the same with water. Now in water, business customers at the moment, they have now got competition in terms of the who sends the bills out, but we don't have that in water. And early experiences in the business thing are that it hasn't led to greater kind of satisfaction levels. There's still a lot of things to work through there. So we do have that system at the moment that you have your water supplied by and billed for by the people who are operating in your local area.
Okay, well that's very interesting. And so for those water companies, and obviously they are regulated, like you said, how do you guys ensure the fair service and pricing as well for the companies?
That's absolutely fundamental to what we do. So it is important that if the companies are going to operate providing such an important service, that they are regulated. And the water
Hmm.
companies are one of the most regulated in the world, in terms of water quality. You've got the Drinking Water Inspectorate, you've got the Environment Agency that look after the environmental impacts of water companies. You've got Ofwat that are the economic regulator, and they set price limits, for example, for water companies. So they don't get to pick what they charge. They will submit business plans which set out how they're going to invest, what they're planning to do, and it's down to Ofwat to tell them overall what they can collect from customers as revenue. for the period in question. And they
Mhm.
also monitor companies' compliance across a range of things. There are license conditions that companies have, which mean that there are certain standards laid down for things that they must do, and Ofwat can keep account of them on those. And they do have powers to fine companies where things go wrong on a repeat basis. And then at CCW, we don't have any direct powers to penalise companies, but obviously what we can do is utilise the profile that we have to highlight problems with companies. So we use the media to flag up
Mhm.
where companies are not doing what they should be, highlight that, and equally to praise companies where they're doing things right. And we do have powers to investigate individual customer complaints, and we work with companies to resolve those. And recently we've added to that an additional function that we will now act as like an ombudsman at the end of that process. So if we've not been able to get the resolution you wanted, a separate part of CCW that works with us will look at that and look at both sides and reach a binding resolution on those cases.
Okay, that's very interesting. So would you say that, if a company is caught doing something wrong, a water company, is like fines and stuff, is that then the main like punishment you'd say if that's what happened?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways. There are actual fines that can be imposed, and that has
Hmm.
been the case, particularly in terms of some past environmental failures. Um, but there's also things like within the price limits that companies can charge. They have certain targets to meet. In some cases, if they overachieve those targets that are to benefit customers, then they might be allowed to recover slightly more in future bills. But equally, if they don't meet what they've said they will, then future bills are adjusted downwards to penalise them and
Hmm.
mean that their ability to make profit is reduced to reflect that failure.
Right, okay. And is that similar to kind of, in financial services, we often talk about like consumer duty and what that means. Is that kind of the similar theme?
Yeah, that's very much like the license condition, and we've got a new license condition introduced earlier this year, which is very much focusing on customer issues. So
Hmm.
that's the real one that is really, very much rooted around are the companies doing the right thing for customers? And there's a whole range of guidance documents that we've helped contribute to as Ofwat has created those that make sure that customers are companies are expected to provide what customers need. And
Hmm.
if looking at that, they don't provide that, then Ofwat can take action. And we feed into that by the complaints figures that we collect from water companies and our own numbers around people coming to us with problems. And also things like we carry out assessments of water companies on things like how they're handling debt and how they're dealing with complaints to make sure that they are, we go in and actually look at the cases and see how they've dealt with those and report our
Hmm.
findings. And that in future can all feed into the Ofwat assessments around whether companies are meeting their license conditions.
So there's so much that happens behind the scenes that like the average person just wouldn't even realize. It's really good to know. So touching now on like kind of the water bill that we all get. What exactly does that cover? Like, what are we paying for?
Yeah, so it's the thing that obviously springs to most people's mind immediately is the water, and that is a big part of it. They collect the water. Now that can be in surface water reservoirs. It can be by extracting it from underground boreholes where the water has gone underground and is stored under there. And it can be from extracting from rivers in some cases. And then they then have to treat that water to very, very high standards, higher standards than you would get in bottled water they have to meet.
Okay.
And then they have to deliver that to consumers wherever they may be across their region. But that's only the start of it, because then they have to take away the wastewater and treat that to high standards. And then dispose of that into the environment, and make sure that wherever possible that's safe to do so. Now, obviously, there's a lot of coverage around that isn't always the case, and companies have been working towards improving in that area over a very long period of time. But they do, in the vast majority of cases, treat the water and dispose of it into the environment. And then there's other things that we don't think about, which is rainwater. So they actually take away all that rain that goes into our gutters and goes down the drain pipes so that our water, our houses are not sort of flooded. Take away
Mm-hmm.
that and again dispose of that and treat that along with the other water, and to make sure it's safe to go back into the environment. And then there's also on the bill, you pay also for things like the administration of all these things. So reading meters if you have one, sending out bills, helping with inquiries over the phone. Those are those fixed costs, if you like, are often the ones that are recovered through the standing charge element of the bill, because
Mm-hmm.
it's often, it doesn't matter how many people are in your property and how much water you're using, the costs of those things tend to be the same, whatever. So it's only right that you would pay for those based on a fixed amount rather than something which is based on the amount of water you're using, or if you don't have a meter, the size of your house.
Okay, that's very interesting. And a little bit of a side note from me, and it's just a personal question. So, sometimes like we'll go on holiday and go to different countries, and they'll be like, you can't drink that water. So, is essentially that because their water companies or whatever it works over there isn't doing that extraction process, like you said, like isn't doing it thoroughly?
So often I think we are a bit overcautious on this actually, because certainly within Europe, they have all in the past had to meet the same European standards around drinking water quality. So in
Mm-hmm.
theory, that water is meeting the same bacteriological standards as any other. Now, there can be things like the mineral content of water that can actually affect people and upset your stomach if you're not used to those particular minerals. So the water can still be perfectly safe, but doesn't agree with someone. So obviously, in those cases, you're probably safer with bottled water. But actually, in most cases, those standards are met. Now, that isn't necessarily the case for some of the more remote places in the world that haven't got
Mm-hmm.
those high standards. And in
Yeah.
those, obviously, it's best to follow whatever the advice is around that. But it does mean that those countries are not perhaps as far along on their journey to
Mm-hmm.
making the water as safe as we are.
Okay. And then just another one a little bit on that. In the UK, some people say, and this is just a myth, but people have told me you can't drink from your upstairs taps, like in your bathroom, you couldn't just go and get a glass of water. Is that true or is that a myth?
So you can drink from it, but it will have gone through extra pipe work. So that's the only
Right.
thing, that it will have just gone through that extra bit of pipe work. Now, in some cases, if we've got old houses, the pipe work that serves us can be made of lead. And
Right.
that's not great, because there are certain things which link lead pipe work to impact on our sort of mental well-being, and how over time can potentially have impacts, particularly
Mm-hmm.
to vulnerable people such as children. So obviously that's a factor. In more modern houses, the risk isn't as great.
Hmm.
Some in some cases, the hot tap, that might be through a storage tank. So again, you wouldn't want to drink that because it may have been stored. But all the water that's coming in through the cold tap should be chlorinated, which will give it that protection against bacteria. But obviously, it's just if it's an upstairs tap, it may well have been through an additional bit of pipe work.
Hmm.
So, again, it's really about personal choice on that one.
Yeah, well, that's weird. I've always wondered that, never knew the answer. So thank you very much for that. So if someone's moving house, what steps should they take in order to kind of manage their water supply, especially if they're moving to a new area where they've got a new company to deal with? Like any advice on that?
Yeah, absolutely. A great practical one is actually check where your stop tap is within the house immediately, because obviously, in the event of something going wrong, there being a leak or something like that, you need to know how to stop that supply of water coming
Hmm.
into the house and potentially damaging things. So before you do anything else, find out from, whoever you've bought it from, or have a look around and find that internal stop tap, usually under the kitchen sink, but
Okay.
they can be different. And the next thing is to speak to your water company and make sure that they know they've got your details, you're moving in, they know the right date that you're moving in so that they can manage the account properly. At that point, you will probably want to check with them whether you're on a water meter or not. If you're not on a water meter, then the next question you should ask is, well, would I be better off with a water meter? It's not the same for everyone. Larger families might pay more on a meter sometimes, but lower small families and single people can often make really big savings just by having a water meter installed, paying for what they actually use. So we've got a meter bill calculator on our website, and people can use that to just enter some really basic details about how they use water, how many people are in the house. And it takes about 2 minutes to fill in those details. And at the end of that, it will tell you how much we'd expect your water bill to be if you had a water meter. Compare that with
Mhm.
what you would be expected to pay otherwise, and that should tell you if you would be better. So at that point, you can ask the water company to install the meter, and they would normally do
Mhm.
that within a maximum of around 12 weeks. And as soon as that
Okay.
happened, they'd switch your bill over to the new basis of charge.
Mhm.
And again, you'd have up to 2 years to then decide if you wanted to switch back to the old system, as long as you're not in an area where meters are being installed compulsorily because of water
Mhm.
shortages. Then you would have that 2 years to be able to switch back. So that's the first thing. The other is to, if you've got any additional needs around your water services, to let them know about those. You may have been registered with your previous company, or it may be your first house, in which case you can speak to them about what extra help they can offer. That could be a braille bill. It could be to appoint someone to be responsible for receiving that bill on your
Mhm.
behalf. It can be to have bottled water delivered if there's a supply interruption because you might not be able to go to a collection point and collect it due to mobility issues. It might be even simple things like leaving a little bit longer if they have to come and visit you, knocking on the door because it might take you a little bit longer to get to them. So the whole range of
Mhm.
different needs there that they can talk through and make sure that they've got that registered for you, and that if they do need to support you with anything, they know exactly what you need in that respect.
Amazing.
And then the other thing to look at is your kind of ability to pay the bills. And if you are struggling at this point in time in your life, then again, there's things that the water company can do to help you. I think we're going to probably talk about those in a little bit more detail. But I think the main message is that, the water companies have got really quite a good range of different options to help people. So if you think you are someone who's going to struggle to pay that bill, just let them know straight away, and they will look at what they can do to help you.
Okay. Oh, lovely. Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And so, if hypothetically someone was moving from one end of the country to another, and it's a completely different company that they're dealing with, should, and again, kind of regard if say they're not on a water meter, should they expect their bill to kind of like change drastically, because it's a different company, or?
It's certainly the case that bills can be different in different areas. So
Mhm.
different companies have got different expectations on them in terms of investment. Can depend on how much coastline they have and how much therefore they need to invest in making sure the environmental discharges into the coast are meeting requirements. It can depend on whether they've got big rural areas in their region, which mean that you're sort of getting water to people in quite remote locations, which can be more costly than supplying big cities. So
Mhm.
all these things can go in, and it does mean that there is can be, more than £100 difference between different areas on bills. And then there's also a difference between the houses. So if you're paying on an unmeasured basis, it's based on a very old rating of your property that was actually a value that was frozen in 1990 when the poll tax was introduced, and it's still used today if you don't have a
Mhm.
meter as the basis for your charge. So again, that can change. That can see apparently similar properties paying more than £100 difference in some cases. And again, you can't appeal that. You can't say, I was in a three-bed semi before, I'm in a three-bed semi now, why am I paying more? What you can do is look if a water meter would benefit you. And if that's the case,
Mhm.
then you can opt to have that installed to solve that problem. But it's certainly the case that you may see differences in bills when you move, be it higher or lower. And again, it's about checking, are you paying on the best approach for you. Unfortunately, if you are going into a property with a meter, you can't move away from that. If you're
Mhm.
moving to somewhere that's meter, the general expectation is we're moving over time to everyone paying by meter. So you can't move that way. But if you are not paying on a meter and that would save you money, you can make that switch immediately.
Okay, thank you. So say if someone is moving and maybe they never moved before, so they find it all a bit overwhelming, when's best to call the new company to tell them that they're moving, or does it happen automatically? Do they have to tell the old company that they're moving? Like, is there any insight on that?
So ideally, you would have told a previous company that you were moving if you have come from another property
Mhm.
where you were paying the bill. And they may pass that detail on. So I know that happens in some cases, and they may even pass things on like details of extra help that you might need. But you definitely can't rely on that. So it's important to have that on one of your first things to do list when you get in. Probably putting the kettle on is ahead of it. But certainly once you've kind of settled down and done that, and you'll be working through a list of the things that you need to do in practical terms for the new property, make sure speaking to the water company is high up on that list so that they can make sure they're supporting you and issuing you with the right bills from day one.
hmm Okay. And so I know you touched on quite a few tips at the start, which was amazing about a moving home. But are there any common mistakes that you see a lot of people make, and hopefully that they can avoid after listening to this?
I think obviously, maybe not contacting the water company and letting them know that they've moved in, either assuming that that's happened automatically. Now that could often mean that maybe if the company assume that the property is empty, then it could be further down the line that they realise you've been living there and they have to then issue a bill which is retrospective and going back and actually provides a big lump sum that they're then expecting you to pay without delay. Now they'll in those cases they'll generally help out and come to an arrangement plan, but it's better not to let that build up in the first place and to actually make sure you're paying from day one. And the other one is about paying on a rateable value bill and then finding out 2 years later, 3 years later, you'd have been paying half the amount on a water meter
Yeah.
because the water company can't then give that money back because they've used that in their calculations about how costs are shared between everyone. And they need you to ask them for a meter. They're not allowed to put a meter in just because they think it will save you money. You have to be the one that asks for that in law. So, it's only when you've done that and they fitted the meter, they can actually issue you that bill based on what you're using. So don't end up paying more than you need to by not checking that out at the start of moving into somewhere.
Yeah, Brill, thank you. Well, the first thing I'm going to do after this call is check if I've got a meter because I'm clueless on things like
Absolutely.
this. So kind of touching back onto CCW, what kind of complaints can you guys help consumers with?
So it really is about any problem that is about your water and sewage services. So it really and that can be the practical things like you've got low water pressure, you've got a supply interruption, the company are not getting out and finding out what the problem is. There is a leak in the area that's causing a problem or you're wanting to try and find out if you've got a leak on your pipe work and you're not getting any support you need from the company on that. On the worst case even scenario and on your sewage service, there can be people who end up with sewage in their either on their garden or even worse than that in their lounge and in their property if there is heavy rainfall and the sewer becomes overwhelmed and that backs up and floods their property. So, that's the absolute worst sort of end of the scale of the problems that we deal with. It's relatively rare, but it does happen. And you can imagine for those people, it's totally devastating and they're then in fear every time that it rains. So helping people make sure that their water companies are responding when that happens, sorting out the immediate problem, but also have a long-term plan to put protections in place to reduce the risk of that ever happening again.
hmm
Um, and then on the more practical side of things, we a lot of the things we deal with are about billing and about support with charges, people understanding why their charges are the way they are, and also disputes with companies around is this bill right? Am I paying the right amount for what I've actually used here? Or have they made an error here? So a lot of it is about those sorts of problems you would expect. And then in my side of the business, on the policy side, what we're working to do constantly is try and make sure that the companies have got procedures and practices in place that mean those things happen less often in the future. So we're working on the policy to try and prevent those things happening in the first place.
Right. Okay. Is there kind of a time frame that you'd say? So obviously, you'd think the first point of call would be to actually call their company, and then if they feel like they're not getting the help that they need, when should they come to you?
So generally, companies have up to about 10 days to sort out a problem. That's not something that's, an immediate, I've got no water. It's more the
Yeah.
sort of, I think there's a problem with my bill. So they generally got that 5 to 10 days for those sorts of things. Having done that, then if you're not happy with the response, you should ask that is escalated within the company to a higher level, give them a chance to look at it. If after that you're still getting that response that you're not happy with, you don't think is fair, that's the point that we can start taking up the issue for you and get involved. But we can give advice at an early stage. People will just ring us and, ask what we think about certain things before they approach their company, and that's something we're happy to do. But we can
Mhm.
actually take up the case once the company's had a chance to do that and had a chance to escalate that within its procedures and a second chance. But after that, really, that's when we can get involved and start putting a bit of pressure on them if necessary.
Yeah, and then if it does get to kind of the dispute level, does CCW kind of act as that middleman, the go between the two?
So at the stage of taking up the complaint, we're very much advocating on your behalf. We're acting like you would, but using our knowledge and
Hmm.
experience and to try and be a super consumer, if you like, and put the case. If that comes back and we've not been able to get the outcome from the company that we wanted or that you wanted, there is that further stage where we can say, okay, well, we'll now send this to the part of CCW that is basically operates as an ombudsman. So at that point, we're not making your case. What we're doing is looking at both sides of the case and saying this is a judgment on what we think the outcome should be. And the companies are signed up to then accept, what we decide. It's a kind of
Okay.
an arm's length thing from our organisation, but operated under CCW, and they will make that independent, impartial judgment and say this is the fair outcome. And water company, you must do that now.
Yeah. Okay. And I was wondering if you're able to share any like kind of customer stories, or just kind of give the listeners a little bit of a practical insight and example of what CCW can actually do.
Yeah, so I think just to kind of give one example that was in our last sort of complaints report, it's just one of many hundreds, if not thousands, of kind of resolutions that we get for customers. I think we deal with around 6 to 7 thousand complaints from customers every year. So this is just kind of one type of resolution that we got. A customer that had been
Hmm.
complaining for a long time, they didn't think their bill that they were receiving over a number of years was fair, didn't think it reflected what they were actually using. The company had kind of dismissed previous claims. We had a look at the case, and before too long, we identified that this was down to a leakage at the property, and water companies are expected to, help the customers in those circumstances and give them an allowance. So as a result of our intervention, then they got a refund of £1,500 on their water charges and an additional £500 in compensation for the failure to resolve the matter earlier. So that, it's a bigger amount for a household customer, but it is, it's not untypical of the sort of resolutions that we can get in cases like that. And then on the policy side, we're constantly working to get companies to introduce more schemes to help customers who are struggling to pay and to promote those schemes. And then to do things like the 2 year kind of period, cooling off period and switching to a meter. So companies have to offer 1 year of that, but actually we thought it's better to have 2 years because company customers can look at their bill over that slightly longer time frame and then have that security of peace of mind that they can switch back to 1 meter charges if they think that they're not paying they're not getting the saving that they were expecting to. So we got all companies to move to offering 2 years for that cooling off period rather than 1 year. So just a few examples of the sorts of ways we try and have an impact for customers.
Yeah, that's amazing, especially the customer story because it shows like how it's worth like fighting for what you believe. Because some people might be like, oh well, I can't be bothered, or it's not worth it, but oftentimes it is.
Absolutely. And, it might be £50, it might be £500. It can, in some cases, be £5,000 or £10,000, if it's been something very serious
Hmm.
or something which has caused damage to your property and you're not getting the outcome you wanted from the company.
Yeah, definitely. So then the final section, I just kind of wanted to touch. Obviously, it's very important for IE Hub to discuss people who are struggling, financially vulnerable. So if people do find themselves in the position, cost of living, like it's hitting us all, and so if someone is struggling with their water bills, what's kind of the first thing they should do?
First thing, absolutely important, is to speak to the water company. They are not going to be sitting in judgment. They're not going to be angry or upset that you're struggling to pay. They'll be really pleased that you've reached out to them to let them know, because they've got teams there that have got lots of tools to try and help people, and that makes their life easier. What they fear is that someone will just stop paying the bill, and they don't know, is
Hmm.
that because they just can't be bothered and they don't want to, or is it someone who's struggling to pay and then have to try and find out that and work it out and help them? So if you let them know as soon as you think, I'm going to struggle here, then that's absolutely one, because the problem is they can do something to try and stop the problem before it even exists. So
Yeah.
that's absolutely the thing to do. And as I say, there are lots of schemes out there to help.
Yeah, definitely. And with water bills, obviously, like you said, the ideal thing is you reach out as soon as you feel like you're struggling. If someone doesn't, what is kind of the effects of that? Because it's not like they're going to shut your water off, is it? So I wonder if you could touch on that a little bit.
No, so they did used to have those powers, but they came to an
Uh,
end, well, over 20 years ago now.
mm,
But and that, I think everyone is pleased about that. What they can do is they can certainly register a default, that you register you've not made that payment with credit reference agencies. Obviously, again, that's something they don't want to do, but if they're just sending out the bills and they're not getting any response whatsoever, then they've got these agreement with the credit reference agencies that they will, advise that's the case, and that can impact your credit rating, your ability to even get a mobile phone, because there is that mark on the account that you're missing payments and there's some sort of problem here. The upside of sharing that data is that many of the companies get that information coming back to them, so that can tell them, we can see this customer is someone that is struggling with other bills as well. So there is a problem here. So let's, redouble our efforts to approach them, find out what's going on, and try and find them. But if they're not getting any communication back, it is very difficult for them to actually give that help, and they do have to
mm,
kind of take those steps. The other things that they can do is, obviously, they can, if things get bad enough, they could issue a county court summons for an outstanding amount if it builds up over time, and issue that, and that would then go to the courts, and you'd have an opportunity to put a defence in. But generally speaking, the court would just look at whether the money is owed, and would have to kind of make a judgment on that. It wouldn't be about, is it affordable to you in that way.
mm-hmm.
So again, really best to avoid it going anywhere near
Okay.
that. They can pass cases to debt collection agencies. That doesn't, that's just a third party that is focusing on collecting the money rather than the water company doing that itself. But
Yeah.
again, it's best to avoid these things by just speaking to the water company. You know, I think some people think it will trigger these sorts of actions if they're upfront and say,
Yeah.
I'm struggling. It's actually the opposite. It will prevent these things happening, and it will mean that they're on a path where they work with you to work out what you can afford to pay, and manage that effectively with you.
Yeah, I think people often think, the company just wants money off me, like they're not there to support me, but like you'd be surprised how much they
Yeah,
just, especially if we reach out as soon as possible. So
yeah.
completely agree with that. So in terms of if someone is in that situation, are there any programs and support systems in place to help them?
Yeah, there's real sort of great schemes out there. So from the very basics, which is just about payment arrangements, spreading costs over longer periods of time, which absolutely is basic, and all companies do.
Hmm.
But then there's things like payment breaks. So it could be that you're just In a short-term financial crisis, maybe, your washing machine's broken, you're having to replace that, your car needs fixing, and this month you're just not going to be able to meet all the bills. If you let the water company know, they can usually agree a payment break with you, and that you'll be able to catch up those payments at a different time. So they can just make those simple things to get you through those short-term difficulties. For others, obviously, it's a much bigger problem, and there may be a big debt that's arisen or a bigger financial crisis that's entered your life. And a lot of the companies have hardship funds, and you can make an application to those funds to tell them your circumstances. And there's a pot of money that they've set aside to allocate to people as grants. They don't have to be paid back. They are just about giving that financial support to people. And it might be about paying off some of your water bill, but in some cases, it could be about helping you buy that washing machine to replace the one that's broken, or even helping with debts with other utility bills. So again, that's another thing that a lot of the companies offer. Another one is if you are in debt, you've built up an amount of debt over time, you feel you can pay a little bit of that back, but it's a big overwhelming amount to face. You can often agree with some companies an arrangement to have that debt repayment matched by the company. So if you agree to pay, for example, £10 a month towards the debt, they will also pay £10 towards that debt. So you end up paying half the amount back that you owed because they've helped you clear that in time. And what they get from that is that you're now making regular payments and you're chipping away at that problem. So if you're doing that and you're rebuilding that relationship with them and getting back on track, they will then write off some of that money and whilst you're making those regular payments.
Yeah.
And then the other really, really big one, which has exploded over the last 10 years, we were really keen that companies put this in place, and we've worked with all companies as they've done this, is social tariff schemes. And they're actually about saying that, before someone's even got into difficulties with their water, this person is on a really low income or is on, a fairly low income, and is going to struggle to pay the water bill that is expected of them. So instead of letting that problem build up, let's actually reduce the water bill straight away up front, avoid them getting into the problem from the start, and actually give them a lower water bill that they can afford rather than confronting them with one that they can't. So we've got these social tariff schemes, and they operate across all the water companies in England and Wales, and you can apply to the company. They do have different rules around who's eligible and what support you will get. That's something we'd like to see change in the future. We want a single social tariff that will support everybody the same wherever they live, and we don't have a postcode lottery. But unfortunately, we do have this system at the moment. However, having said that, it is still providing fantastic help to more than 1 million households across England and Wales. So this isn't something that is for a few customers here and there that people think it won't be for me. It absolutely may be for you if you're on a lower income and are struggling to pay your bill. So they look at things like the overall income of the household, or in some cases whether you're on benefits. And then can make that adjustment to the bill, whether it's a percentage reduction or by capping it at a level so it never goes above it if you're on a water meter. That's a fantastic way of and the companies, are geared up. They've got these schemes waiting, that they've got targets to hit in terms of the number of people they get on these schemes. So they're actually, really welcoming to get you on the scheme if you meet the criteria for it.
Yeah, I absolutely love social tariffs because I hope it be implemented a benefits checker. And there's so many people kind of like you said who would come to IE Hub, do the journey they're here for, and then be like, oh no, I'm not entitled to anything, like I don't think I am. And I'm like, well, just try. It takes literally a couple of minutes just to check. And it's so surprising the amount of people that actually do qualify for it, and it can help. Every little penny helps, doesn't it? So
Absolutely. And all the water companies have the details about their schemes on their website. But also, if you visit our website at the Consumer Council for Water, we've got a page which has, for all the companies, the rules around their schemes. So you can check in one place whether you might be eligible for your company's scheme, and how to contact them to check that out.
amazing.
They also have another scheme. All companies have a scheme called the Water Shore scheme, and that's specifically for people who are on water meters, but you need to use an additional amount of water because they've either got a large family, so three or more children in the house, or alternatively, they have a medical condition that requires additional water usage. And if you meet those criteria and you also are on benefits, income related benefits, then you can have your water bill capped at an average level. So that extra water you're using for that medical condition, you're not having to pay for that. You're not having to worry about restricting how much water you use for those things, because actually you're never going to pay more than that average amount for that bill.
Okay, that's really handy to know, and yeah, definitely I will link all the links below for anyone who does listen to this and think,
Yeah.
I think that could be me, so that'd be amazing. So just final question, how can consumers negotiate or kind of work out a payment plan with their water supplier? Do they just contact them and then just let the company deal with it, or is there anything that the actual customer can do or say?
Yeah, so obviously the services that IE Hub offer is fantastic, and that's one great way of making sure that you're getting information to your water company,
Hmm.
and that's something that can go to a lot of different people who might be looking at financial circumstances, because it's really important that the companies take account of your circumstances in the round. And look at all your circumstances rather than just trying to kind of get their piece of the pie and their amount. They're actually saying, look, how much does this person need to live on? What are their other bills? So absolutely really important to do that. And the water company will tell you, how you can do that, but also, IE Hub is a great way to do that too.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. We appreciate everyone who loves IE Hub. We love that. So just to conclude then, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any signposting you'd like to do to the listeners? Anything else?
Yeah, just to say really that we do have all those tools on our website, which is ccw.org.uk. And on there we've got things like the meter bill calculator, which really is quick to check whether you'd save money. We've got a benefits calculator to try and identify if you're missing out on any benefits that you're eligible to claim. And then we've got that social tariff guide, which sets out, what the social tariff offering is in different areas. So, have a look at that. We've also got a podcast ourselves, which is the Waterfall
Um,
podcast. And all of that is about water efficiency and how you can save money if you have a meter by using less water. But it covers all sorts of areas, including money saving tips and exploring with various people who work within the industry how it all
mhm.
works. So if anybody's interested in knowing more about water, that's a great way to have a look.
Lovely. I absolutely love that all these podcasts are coming out just to help people kind of break down the topic of money because we don't get taught it in school. You're just kind of thrown into adult life and you're like just expected to know. So I absolutely love that you got a podcast as well.
Absolutely. So, hats off to you. You're doing a great job with this.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate this chat, Andy. And I think it's been really insightful. So yeah, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. That was
Right.
great. Thanks, Tanisha.
No worries.